everyone's ready, we'll go ahead and start. Greg is not here today. He is enjoying Disney World. And Sherry Nelson is not here today. She's enjoying quarantine. So we have a couple of people missing. Are there any additions or changes to the agenda for today? Hearing none, can we have an approval, motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Motion to approve the July 2, 2021 minutes? Have a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We're moving right along. We have guest speakers today, the FRATF, and I'll let Karen.
Well, I had a bio on the one I thought was presenting, so I'll just turn it over to, how about we turn it over to,
Okay, Joni and I were the ones that are gonna give you kind of the frat type of thing, and then Joni said, well, you work the most, you get to do the most of the talking here, so she'll jump in from the board perspective if you have any questions, type of stuff here. But what I was told is you just want kind of an overview, you didn't want any slides, type of stuff here, of what we went and did for the last 8 months of our lives here. I will say right at the beginning for the folks on this is we were data driven. There was a lot of time and effort put into going through the data and not the cost, but the expense data, the salaries, all kinds of data, the building, the O&M data that was done up front. I think the number that our data guy, Larry, was there's 1,800 line items of data that were analyzed through this process. To look at where are we going in the next, from 2022 to 2027. That was the time of where you wanted to go. To say, here's what we have, here's what the assessment brings in today, based on if we just did the normal CPI, how much we would there. And as you totaled all that up, and the term red blob was coined in one of our meetings, that it's roughly $6.7 million a year to fix what has not been fixed over the last, not just the last 4 or 5 years, but what hasn't been fixed probably in the last 15 years or so or more. That's the infrastructure. That's your roads. That's your culverts. That's your water, wastewater, everything that was laid out. That figure is, and I mean, if someone is so inclined, and the detail can be excruciating, painful out there, but that's what the bogey was, to say here's how we can, what we need to shoot for. As that was done, at the same time, we were taking inputs on what are the ideas, how we could generate revenue or cut expenses. That was key, in that we needed to look at both sides of the house on expense as well as revenue there. We took in almost over 300 inputs from the community. I mean, we're getting all kinds of, when you whittled all those down, it came out to about 80 ideas that we researched. And we categorized those into 4 different buckets. One was expense reduction. Second was other revenue sources. How can you reach out to the state, county, or potentially federal, if there's anything like that? Or if there's anything, we could do that. Then we looked at the fees, the amenity fees, whether it be golf, pickleball, type of fees there, or other. And then finally was assessments. What could we do with assessment dollars there? Type of stuff here. I will tell you, if you took all the ideas of the first 3, it still did not even come near to solving the $6.7 million a year problem. So early on, we knew that there's going to have to be some type of assessment out there. As you looked at the other revenue or the personnel or their expense reduction, there's only so much you can do. The POA is actually operating on a very thin margin as it is. And people think there's a lot of fat. And we've used the discussion item out there that how much money was cut out of senior management in the last year. There was a significant amount of dollars. So where do you cut some more? When you start cutting, you're cutting at muscle. one of the, there are some acquisition strategies that can be done and maybe save monies. We're talking $10,000 to $20,000 a year. It's not, but all those count, when you start adding them up. We start looking at big items. We got assets. Do we potentially sell off assets? Sell off the Woodlands? Sell off Coronado Center, something? There's second and third level consequences there. You sell it to someone, and do they take care of it, or does it turn into another CHI St. Vincent property that sits at Carmona and DeSoto? So there's all these type of things there. But we looked at those type of things, and they're available out there if we needed to go there. And the last thing that caught a lot of social media buzz was we looked at our police force, in that we spend about $2 million a year to provide the security that the village feels comfortable on. Was there something we could do? If you did away with it, relied totally on the sheriffs, you can save $2 million a year. But you ain't getting the response time like the village is accustomed to. So then we looked at another option of how you could contract it out and you could save some money. So we've looked at it. There just was not a lot of expense reduction out there. So then we start looking at other revenue sources. And we'll talk briefly, how do we reach out and maybe develop some outside water sales or something like that. There's just not how can we sell some services out there? So we looked at that. And then you start talking about the fees. One, how do you raise fees here and there? But again, it's sensitive to demand, because if you raise the fees too much, you drive the demand down. And we've been through that. So we did all the searching through on fees there and made some minor adjustments to the amenity fees. One of the ideas that came up early on was we always have the discussion about improved versus unimproved property owners, and people pay different rates. Well, do we go back and potentially change the amenity rates so that there is a unimproved rate and an improved rate? So if you live here and you're paying X amount of dollars for the improved rate, you get to golf at X dollars. If you're living in Little Rock, you're charged Y dollars. And we did some calculations of that and made some recommendations on adjusting some potential rates there. And then lastly, we looked at the assessments, knowing that we're going to have to do something there. Came up with different ideas of how you increase the assessments over the years by amounts, how you do all those type of things. We looked at a 3-tier assessment, and we looked at actually a 4-tier assessment. But when you start talking about how you administer and determine and run a 3 or a 4-tier assessment, it gets really complicated quick. And one of the second order consequences is, how do you guarantee that if you're running a 3-tier or 4-tier, knowing who's going to be in each tier, because you're counting on that 3rd and 4th tier to maybe bring in some extra funds there. Determining a take rate on these was going to be a challenge to give us stuff there. So we looked at that and said, well, the 2 tier is probably where we're going to stay out there. So that's kind of over the 8 months, like I said, over 80 different ideas. They've been out there, they're listed, they're published. I don't know what else you can do. I mean, there were ideas, we had some really great ideas we thought were going to be good, like a village or a visitor fee. And boy, we got a lot of visitor fee. Boy, when you start trying to peel the onion on how you administer and who gets charged what and everything else on a visitor fee, John Paul's staff was going to be spending twice as much time trying to figure out how to charge people for whatever you're going to charge them. So we ran into, when we start looking at criteria, that wasn't going to be administered. One thing early on that we talked about is any of these ideas had to be consistent with 5 criteria. One, are they legal? Are they consistent with our declarations? Were they administratively? Were they going to be feasible or viable with us as property owners? And now I'm forgetting the 4th one there. But there's a 5th one out there. But we had criteria that we judged there. So that reduced a lot of the ideas down to maybe 30 of the 80 remained that we even could place against. As we looked at all these ideas, we built the board 3 recommendations First one was called Rapid Recovery. You've seen all about it. It's hitting them right in 2022 with an assessment increase of $20, basically $20, and stepping up over the next 3 years. Second one was a special assessment, because we heard very strongly about people want to make sure that the money that goes to the infrastructure goes to fix the infrastructure, because there's been so much concern, and rightfully so, over the last few years after the previous thing, some of the money did not go to where it probably was, where it was told it was going to go. And that led to one of the recommendations we made to the board was they need to develop policy, and I know they're working on it, to how do you make sure that money gets directed where it needs to go? And that's a board type of issue there. And then the third one is more of a balanced. We didn't jump as high as quickly out there, so you had 3 different recommendations. All the recommendations had an assessment piece in it, a second piece, and we get a lot of communication from the property owners about the buy-in fee, and we know it does have a challenge with the realty side of the house, but we've made that recommendation that, you know, they're doing it other places. The board needs to decide, you know, if they want to implement the buy-in fee and how that's going to work, but there is money there, and really the sad part about it is we would have done the buy-in fee because that was part of the 2014-2015 assessment campaign, was to have a buy-in fee, and it did not go over. It went away, but that was, if we would have ran $1,000 a year buy-in fee over the last 5 years, that was $3 million. It's roughly $600,000 a year we'd have collected on new property owners, not existing property owners. Third part of it is to make some adjustment, or in the recommendation was to make some adjustments to the fee structure, whether it's golf, unimproved versus improved, and there's a number out there that was there. And lastly is utilities. We can always make some adjustments. We're still running kind of in the middle of the rate structure. Years ago, we were really low. Now we've got to the middle, so there's still some adjustments there. So that was the whole 8 months in putting it, and then developing those, briefing them, and turning it over to the board, because we are not the FRAT was not a decision maker. We knew we needed to do as much work as possible so we can turn it over to Joni and the board to do that. So that's the quick overview. I was told that if you want to ask questions, I'll be very honest with you. What went on behind this, this FRAT spent many hours in this room, you know, discussing some stuff. And there was some ideas that got a little heated. We were a little bit challenged, and Bob will tell. We had his wife Connie on there because we were concerned about the diversity of the village, because we know that from west end to east end, there are different economic situations. And what was developed in 1970 by John Cooper may not be the same as what is happening on other areas of the village. So we had to, and we looked at challenges out there of how you deal with that. So, and the legal challenges of it. Because that's the other side of the house, is trying to make sure anything we presented to the board was going to pass the legal challenges out there. Questions? Or Joni, your turn. So.
We, the board, cannot thank the FRAT committee enough for all the work they did. And I think Keith may have made it a little light of spending many hours in here. They spent many, many, many hours in here. And the villagers owe them a thank you too, because I think this is probably the most in-depth research that's ever been done here. And it was pretty incredible with the people they had on the task force. When they passed this to the board then, initially, option 3 was going to be our takeaway, that we would go with option 3. However, when you really looked at the slide that to me was the most in your face, and you've probably seen it out there if you've looked at it, the board, in discussing it, realized that 2024 is when we would actually take the revenue that we got from the balanced approach, option 3. It would have been 2024 before the two lines would meet. before the red and green would meet. And with the more aggressive approach, it would start off and by 2023, we would, or I'm sorry, 2023, we would be there right at the beginning of the year. And that was the board struggle. Which one do we go with? But option 3, even though we would hit that at 2024, we would have moved to the back end to go in the red, 22s and 23s operational loss or things that didn't happen. I mean, that's just what it came down to. And we struggled with, do we add more time, do we make it 5 years instead of 3? And I actually called for a special vote after the board meeting. We did not vote in the regular board meeting because we wanted to still have time to think about it before we actually made the final vote. And we had a special meeting, and we opted to go with the aggressive approach. And we don't know where we'll be 5 years from now.
And one of the key things here, and I wanted to kind of applaud the POA staff, because you don't realize that we have the detail finally to do this data analysis. We haven't had that for many years. I mean, the data just wasn't there. But one of the things that, as the FRAT was working, we carried a thing called, and Larry Steiner, who coined them as the known unknowns. Water tank on the east end, or maybe 2 water tanks on the east end. They weren't quantifiable. Salary increase was another one. In that, do we tackle that? That had been laid out at CPI, 3% in all our dealings. But if the minimum wage goes up again, those are some of the other areas. So it was that slow ramp up, and then, yes, these are these need to be turned in from known unknowns to they're known now, and they need to be added in there. So that was part of the process, the balanced, and then turning over the board made a decision to say, we need to have these as knowns now and put into the equation. So that's one of the big differences between for August and when the board voted too.
And it did, the world is changing very rapidly, and that's what we were seeing with, face it, we have a lot of empty slots open in the POA staff, and John Paul can tell that better than anybody of what's going on. We're down, how many police officers, John? 6? 6 police officers down because they can go someplace else and make more money. So that all happened from the time that they actually started working on the project until we got it, and that was just something that we were really concerned with. Keith mentioned the policy, and yes, from day one, it's been felt that we need some kind of a policy that we could at least put in to the bylaws and make it difficult enough to change it, because as you all know, the boards change frequently, like every year. And so we want the next 3 years of assessment increase to be solid into what we need, not building anything, but taking care of what we have. And I think that's what most of the village wants, take care of what we have. And that's in line with the declaration, so.
You know, this thing is very important to pass. And unfortunately, perception plays
Understand.
well in here. And there is no trust in the board when you talk about people spending money. And my feeling is, it would have been a lot smarter in the long run if the board would have went with option 3, showed the people what you were doing, and then if you needed to come back in 2 years, say, you know, here's what we're doing, but we need more money, we're proving to you we can do it, but give us a little more increase. But hitting them the way you're doing right now, they're just gonna say no. And what happens if they say no? We can't afford to have that happen. And I think you're asking too much And your reputation isn't there to support it, and you need to build that trust. And if you would have went with option 3, I think that would pass quite easily, because people realize that they need to put money into it. But to take the top end with the track record the board has, it might fail. And if it does, then where are we?
So if it does fail,
Yeah,
we'll have probably a second vote on something, maybe the same one, maybe something different. If that doesn't pass, then we have to start looking at some of the other things, which is we will reduce services, we will have to reduce this or that, buildings may have to be closed. I don't
You
know,
what
I
you're
don't
tell-
have the answer.
You know what
to
you're
that.
telling them by doing that? See, there are different ways they could have done it less. Instead of going the third option and then taking
Does
it up.
anyone really want to cut the services and cut what you have here in the village?
No, but the fact is, you just can't go from 0 up to 10. And with the track record the board has, and stand there and people's vote for it. And we need people to vote for this. We cannot afford to have it not pass. But yet, we're on the edge of where it may not.
And if it doesn't, we'll have to face it then. But in the board's estimation, this is the right thing to do. The last assessment increase stated in it that assessment increase would last until 2020.
2020,
And it was stated in that.
we were going to go negative in 2020.
Yes. And that's happened.
Well-
And so,
But one thing about it, a board member needs to know the people that they're representing, what they'll do and what they won't do. They have to have a feeling of what the people will do and kind of guide that way. And by doing it this way, it's not, somehow I just think you're disconnected from what the people really feel out there and what they, as far as trust goes and everything else. And there's, like I said, there's no doubt, this has to pass. But to me, starting it and then showing it and then kicking it up would have been a lot easier for people to stomach.
well, I guess the only thing I can say is the board that you have now is 100% committed to doing the right thing for the village. This is a very professional board.
Ma'am, they have heard this for how many boards
But
and
we
how many
weren't
general
those-
managers?
We weren't those boards, and quite frankly, I've never been used to being treated with distrust on my predecessor, whomever that might be, when I was working. When I came into a job, I came into a job to do the best I could. And I didn't come in with the feeling that, well, the last person that had this job did a crummy job. And so therefore, you're not trusted. This board is a trustworthy board. And everyone can sit there and say, well, the past boards were not the past board. You had something, Bob?
Well, I just want to commend what's been done. And yeah, it might have been easier to have gone with the 3, but I praise the board for tackling, moving ahead with the aggressive move. I just think we all need in this community to get behind this and support it in every way possible. The one thing I would urge is also there are other recommendations that came out of the frat, and I don't think the committee should, the board should wait on doing those. I think some of those other things that you have the power to do, you ought to indicate, hey, we're doing them. We're not waiting until the vote is over. We're gonna do these things as well, because we just need to, I think we all need to go full steam ahead.
And we don't want everything on the shoulders of the property owners.
That's right, and there are some other things, and so I think those ought to be put in place as quickly as possible.
But one thing, ma'am, being in politics myself as a commissioner or mayor, when I took the job, I knew I had to earn it. I didn't expect people to trust me. I had to show them that they could trust me.
Agreed.
And if you take the feeling that oh, I'm trustworthy, and they should know we're all trustworthy. I'm sorry. People aren't that way. You have to prove it to them. And it doesn't, it says too bad what happened in front, but the fact is, that's what they're remembering, and it's up to you to earn their trust. And that's what it is in politics, I'm sorry.
I completely understand,
Okay.
completely understand.
Kurt?
I think what the conversation kind of boils down to, or Sam's side of the conversation boils down to, is the board needs to communicate more with the community. And discuss what you're doing, how you're doing it, and how you're going to do it. This is something that's been lacking in the past. It's always been, you can come to board meetings, sit in here, and you never had any advance notice of what was happening, what was going on, what was going to be discussed or anything. So I think that the board needs to be more open to discussion and putting things out to the community.
You know, that's
Now,
a
we
good
got-
point. That's a great point.
We
I'm
got,
sorry.
a community here that's, one part of it is very antagonistic, to say the least. That and they're gonna be against anything you wanna do, so, but, that's what you gotta take, you all gotta take the hit. Because you're the new kids in there, you're the new ones on the block, and you've gotta win the trust. And what you set up today will go on to the future boards that come in after you. So my suggestion is you get out and you communicate. You start attending, or sending representatives to attend the various club meetings, the Lion Club, and the other club meetings around here, to communicate what these proposals are, what the purpose of them are, and what's behind them. That would be my strong suggestion to you. Second suggestion, I don't know what was discussed at your meeting, but I'd like to hear more about what kind of revenue-producing activities you were going, because there are a couple that I'm very familiar with from outside the village that might be good sources of income for the village. In fact, I know one of them would be.
We've looked at any of the revenue sources that were out there, it's all listed in there, Kurt. I mean, you can go, this was just the paperwork for
I
the
don't
board.
have that.
It's all listed on the website.
Okay.
We've put everything, we have 8 months' worth of work on the POA website. We've been very conscious about that so that the public could see all the things we're looking at.
I mean, Keith, if you're involved in it, I'm sure Scotchy's
I
done
mean,
very
it's-
well and very,
Yeah.
very thoughtfully put through. I have confidence in that.
But yeah, that's what we tell the public, go to the website, because, I mean, we can print out this stuff, we can send out everything else, but we've posted everything. And I don't know what else we could be as far as transparent, but other revenue sources, whatever we can. I mean, we'll talk about water and wastewater here when we get to another portion of this meeting
Okay.
today. But we looked at all those things. I mean, we looked at the best one, and this one didn't go over well. But we wanted to try to figure out if we could sell our biosolids. You know what that is. But when we start pulling the level of detail to selling our biosolids, it was gonna cost us so much money that it wasn't gonna be a revenue source for many years down the road. But, you know,
Absolutely right.
so,
But we also, just to answer a part of it, Keith, you had 4 frat meetings.
public
two at night,
meetings,
two
town hall
during the
forums,
day.
I mean,
And how was that attended?
the public meetings were,
They were
they were.
good, not
watched on-
great.
Yeah, they were, we don't know how many people watched those online. The forums only were 100 to 150 people,
Right.
so. we did-
And the board meetings, since this board
yeah.
came on in April, the meetings have been open for comments after every meeting, and it, because there haven't been many attending, we have been able to open up the discussion, and they have been able to answer or ask questions and get answers. We send out a board, when there's something that's going on or whatever, we send it out. It's kind of as a digest form. We've tried to touch the public as much as possible.
Okay.
And we haven't gotten people to touch back, although with them opening up with the email, I mean, you said you got about 300.
Oh, we got more than 300, I mean, we got almost 400 emails. We got, 300 of them that had any type of ideas, and many of them were duplicates, but,
But every single one of those were touched and.
touched and
put
read,
into-
yeah.
Right, and so if someone says that we're not being transparent or we're not being open, I don't know what else we can do. We've offered everything that we can offer.
I'm sorry. People don't go to meetings. They don't go to meetings, number one is, a lot of them are afraid to talk in public and everything else. What I found and did in the city I was at was actually we went to them, and I like your idea. They attended clubs. Here's what we want to do. And we don't expect you to come to us, but we're going to come to you because we care about your opinion. It does two things. It tells them that you're willing to work to come to them, and they know that's an inconvenience. But that adds something to it. And if I was you, I would set up a bunch of these meetings to explain what you're doing before the voting. And then maybe you can capture it.
And
But if you
Sam,
expect them to come to you, it's not going to
before
happen.
you go too far down, there is a whole separate, and they are not frat members. This was a whole other group that is doing that just now to support
Right.
the board.
And-
And if there's committees out there that, or not committees, but organizations that want there's a whole, it's speakuphsvpoa.org, and send a note to them, or contact Pam Avila, because she's kind of
She's handling it.
handling that for the board. There's folks set up, and it's a board member and a frat member that will go out and speak to any of these groups. I mean, that's all been, but there's not been a big influx of people, because we are still in a pseudo-weird situation here. Everybody thought COVID was gonna be over, and it's not over.
Right.
So there's still a lot of, hey,
But
we're looking at the
I
camera.
do know of two that have already
Yeah.
contacted us and want someone to come
Yeah.
to their meeting. I
Well,
mean, that's a,
Yeah.
How about going to the neighborhoods? I mean, you
The
got these
neighborhoods have to
block-
invite.
They have to
They have to
invite.
invite. I mean, that's it, people, invite. Sam, go out to your neighbor, invite people, or invite the things, and people will come out to do the presentations. But they're not gonna just show up in the neighborhood and say, we're here to brief.
No.
But I'm
What
just saying-
No, that's
I'm
a
saying, if I was a PO board member, I'd make an announcement, or I'd go to this group and say, hey, at this clubhouse, I'm gonna be here at such and such a day, and I'd like to talk to all the people in this area, and the whole thing, do you got concerns? I'm coming to you. In other words, the POA is going to them. It's not expecting them to say, oh, will you come and talk to us? Because people aren't gonna do that, I'm sorry.
I think, Sam, you need to talk with Pam Avila, because she's the one who's, in charge of that. And I would just say, Pam, you know who Pam was, she used to sit right here, so, and she's taken on that responsibility.
David?
I will just add, my career was in government. So I have some background in the atmosphere around government. And unfortunately, trust can't get built overnight. It's not something that this board, even though it means well, is gonna be able to convince villagers of in a day or a week. And maybe not even by the time of this particular election. In my career, one of my mantras to my staff was that all day, every day, we have to prove in every single interaction with a citizen, in every phone call we take, in every email that we send, that we are not the government that they are gonna see presented on tonight's news. Tonight. And then the news is gonna talk about how horrible government is again tomorrow night. forever. And it is our job every day to try to convince the people that we just happen to interact with that day. We're not even gonna get to touch everybody. There's gonna be people watching the news tonight that we were not able to convince otherwise during the day today. But we do what we can. The bottom line on that is, the trust and accountability that has not been there, you're not gonna snap your fingers and get it today.
I know. Believe me, I completely understand that, and every board member completely understands that. But as you can imagine, we're trying to do the best that we can, and it's frustrating to have that thrown up every day that, yeah, as a volunteer too.
And if I can give my 2 cents worth, because as a politician, and I'm still being judged on my predecessor.
Sure.
And it's, when you raise your hand and say, I'll do this, and you're gonna get attacked and somebody's gonna hate you immediately. And that's just part that goes with the job. And especially when you're getting paid as much as you're getting paid, when you're putting out all the effort, there's nothing more that puts you down than when you're doing the very best you can and someone says that ain't good enough, that. So I'd say don't get discouraged, keep doing. I'm sure that this study has been the most extensive and the best it could be. And when I know that sometimes in government that sometimes we get it right. And if we get it right, if we could just make the people see and understand that, then they would support us. And that's the hardest thing, because especially during COVID, they won't come to meetings. They won't, they got their own lives and they're busy in their own lives. So for them to come to ours, I do agree with Sam that going to those meetings and things would be good. But the biggest thing is, it's important that this thing pass. And so any and everything y'all can do to get it passed, being transparent, which I know you already are. I get frustrated during session. You can watch everything I do, every vote I make, every step I make, and you come chew me out after I've told you where to go look for it. And so I understand your frustration, but I would just say do the best campaign that you can to get the information out, because the people know what you know, they will support it. So whatever you can do to get that out there in the public the best you can, and something that they will see or they'll listen to, is the best you can do, and all you can do is the best you can do.
Yes, thank you.
And I will just briefly add something that I found anyway that can really help people in government's attitude as they deal with this, is to focus primarily on who you consider to be the independents and the undecideds. You're gonna have some people telling you how wonderful you are even when you know you're not, and you have to ignore them. And then you have the people that are gonna hate you even if they go to church with you every Sunday. And you have to ignore them too, because you're never gonna turn them around. You have to focus on to what degree am I swaying the ones that are swayable. And if you keep your own focus and attention on that group, you can see some wins that'll keep you going.
Right, thank you.
Karen?
I just want to say thank you, first of all, to the task force, because the amount of work that went into this and these reports are just, it's amazing. And I think that the time involved, is a show of what it meant to them as property owners to look at the village. And we have a jewel here. And it's my job to get to go out and bring people into the village every day and to focus on why we want to live here. And if we don't protect that and we don't continue to go forward in having these, I know the board made a tough decision, but I think it's our board that we elected and we have to support them. And so I just want to say thank you for your service and what you guys have done, and to the task force, and that we need to move forward, and we need to continue to make the village as prosperous as it can be. I'm excited about the potential revenue sources that are available, and looking forward to hearing more about that. But we also need to point people to the website, to point them to this information and to be able to tell them where to go find that. And I'm sitting here thinking about my own sphere of influence and people I know, and I haven't done a good job of that. And so when I leave here today, I'm going to do that. I'm gonna make sure that those who are voting, that I can go out and touch, know where to go find that information to see it for themselves.
Thank you.
I think the
That's what we need.
board should be commended for looking in the village for the talent and finding the people who are willing to put in the work to do this. I hate to think how much a study like this would have cost had we gone to McKinsey or Boston Consulting or Bain or one of the other consulting.
And not been as good.
And I also commend the task force for the work they put in. I went to a couple of the forums, and the detailed work is out there. I think one thing that we all have to think about is, in terms of transparency, Keith's got his hand on the Bible there, but you got to get people to read it, and that's where the problem is. The facts are there. How do we get people to read, understand, and act with a reasoned approach as opposed to a, this is gonna hit my pocketbook approach? So, we have some guests in the audience. Do y'all have any comments or questions? Okay. In picking juries, the lawyer would generally ask a question like that, and he'd say, I take it by your silence that you don't. So, I take it by your silence that you don't. Do we have any more questions or any more comments that we'd like to have? Okay, Keith, Joni, thank you very much for coming today. We appreciate it. We can move forward with our reports.
We're not dismissing either one of them.
Joni, the first report is from the POA board. If you have anything else to add, we'd be happy to. And John Paul will be coming up later, so you can defer to him if you like.
I think we just covered what the board is wrangling with right now. And I don't know that there's any more to add to that.
Thank you.
And we will have something maybe next month or whatever, I don't know, but not today. But John Paul will cover all the fun stuff.
I want to say one thing we should note. Today is Stephanie Heffer's last day at the POA, and she has been very helpful to this committee. Even, I was getting emails this morning from her on the economic impact study. We'd like to, as the committee, express our appreciation to her and wish her the best. John Paul, if you'd like to add anything?
Well, I'm new in here, and we are going to miss Stephanie. It's a big void in the POA that is leaving, and I made the statement the other day, totally unintended, that our best is getting our best, and I think that it was just off the cuff, but it was appropriate. I'll just kind of fill you in with what we're currently doing in the village. We're still having staffing challenges, both due to COVID and losing some key people. We said a minute ago, we lost 6 police officers, and we've got an entire recreation maintenance crew in quarantine right now. And I just want to reiterate how good a job this staff does just in keeping the gates open every day and keeping the doors open, because right now we're having some challenges, but they're up to it and they're doing a very good job. We just improved the east gate to mirror the west gate with the lanes that are narrowed, and to vet people that are coming into the village much better than we have in the past. And we're looking now at some gate improvements at the Balboa Gate to start with, and then at the Danville Gate and the Lazy Po Gate. to put in rapid closers to where we can stop tailgating coming in the village, pretty much eliminate it from what it's being told for very, very little money. I was amazed at what that, we can do that for, look for those improvements in the future. And the Balboa Club is in its final stages of a minor renovation. We moved the golf department over there to free up some space in the POA building that we needed. And they're over there with the Tea Time office. We've leased out the Balboa Club to the old Charlie's Pizza operator, Brandon Kogut, who is operating the grill downstairs, and he has plans to open the kitchen upstairs to do a bigger menu, start opening for breakfast down there, and eventually go into the cafe upstairs, not the big dining hall in the back, but just the cafe upstairs. We do still have to fix the porte-cochere out front, but the windows have been replaced. It looks a lot better over there. It really looks like a place again. So that's what's going on there. Just to give you a couple of things that are happening now in the village. And we've got a road closure coming up at Barcelona and Balboa starting Tuesday, that we had a culvert failure there, 48-inch culvert. Barcelona and DeSoto.
That's what did I say?
Balboa.
Oh, Barcelona and DeSoto, thank you.
Yeah, impacts me.
It will. It's virtually the same detour that we had last time for when they did it in front of the pickleball facility, but hopefully with good weather, it'll only take a week. And we can get that in and get it out of there, but it is a major culvert that we're going to have to replace. And then there are 5 culverts we're going to have to replace on Levantino right after that. That will cause a closure over there for a little while, but that's what's happening, and that's part of the red blob that Keith's talking about. This culvert at Barcelona and DeSoto was a grade 3, which we didn't expect to fail for another couple of years, but it failed in a big rainstorm not too long ago. And so we're having to gear up, and this is not a cheap thing. This is almost $100,000 that we're gonna have to put out to fix this culvert. We're doing a lot of these in-house. Some of them, we're gonna have crews that help us come in when we get the real deep ones that we need the expertise with. But that's what's going on, and I'll take any questions that you have for me. I'm gonna be here for another month or two, so I'll be at your next meeting. But we do wish the best to Stephanie, and it's gonna leave a big void for us. Any questions? Thank you. Keith, any broadband update?
And I talked with Sam and anything, there's a symposium that we're trying to figure out, and we probably, someone from the POA, that is being held next Wednesday at Hot Springs Convention Center. It's for the legislators. Richard, McGrew will be there, but if we're interested, we probably need to have someone from the POA attend that. And just to sit there and listen, what they're gonna talk about broadband across the state. And will have some impact on that, because we continue to, one of the topics will be the American Rescue Plan Act funding. So how that may play out. And I know that's something that in a meeting that John Paul, myself, and Judge Airy had with First Electric, we talked specifically about that as what First Electric potentially, trying to see if there's ARPA funds that might be available to help them with their broadband project, because that's a significant project across Saline County. I mean, I forgot, $150 to $200 million project, but if they can secure any type of funding, every little bit helps out there. So I would kind of throw that back to you guys. Someone, I don't know if it's Will.
Well, when is this?
Wednesday, all day, and there's a registration form and stuff like that. Sam's got it, so.
At the convention center?
At the
Yeah,
convention center. So he's got it for that, and again.
It would be Will.
Yeah, so probably if it's Will to go down there, but that's where this broadband, and that ties right into the ARPA funding out there, so.
And Will Rainwater's our new IT, head of IT, who is
we're
Just,
really
yeah, we just need to
looking-
know who the POA person probably needs to go there and sit with, because there's a potential impact. You know, it's, and that's on the Saline County side, and maybe the Garland County side's another issue, out there, so that's kind of it on broadband.
Okay, thank you. Anything on highway or tri-lakes?
I got that.
Okay, Sam?
Yeah, but Sam.
One thing on that meeting, it is 8 to 5:30. The governor will be there to address it at the beginning. And they have a lunch, and then it sounds like 5:30 they have a reception, so that'd give Will time to talk to other people there and the whole thing. And if nothing else, let people know that the village is here.
Okay. How does he register?
Pardon me?
How does he register? Does he need to?
I got the.
I'll get with you.
I got the phone number, and I can give you John
I'll get
Paul
with you.
and the email address.
Thank you.
The other thing, and I got this from my, thanks to Republican representative, is that the bypass project is actually a little bit ahead of schedule, but they're still saying late 2022. Again, it's going to cover 5.8 miles in length, and currently we're looking at $77.3 million. Now, to go along with that is, and you've probably noticed if you've traveled down 5, is that they're working on the bypass between Highway 5 and 7.
Roundabout.
The roundabout.
Or the roundabout, that's better, yes, thank you. And they're saying that should be completed early 2022. And the cost of that was 18.1 million, 4.3. They're also then looking at the flooding problem that was along Highway 7. And so that's brought the attention, it's like improvements on that's gonna be made totaling 3.5 miles along 7, between Brant Road and Highway 298. And that's gonna be 6.7, and that should be completed late this year or early 2022. And then they're also then continuing to work on Highway 5 between Garland County line and Benton, and they hope to have that completed this year or early 2022. So there's always the pop there, but they're taking out some of the curves and stuff that everyone is aware of, and Keith has described.
And hopefully you've seen in the last week, they laid asphalt down there on some of those new curves. So it's gonna be interesting to see how that project moves in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah.
It was interesting seeing how that asphalt's about, 4 feet above the road right now.
Well, you're also seeing curbs and gutters at the roundabout.
Yes, that they're working on.
David?
And just one brief additional sort of public service message about the roundabout area. I was in another meeting this week, and the school superintendent of Fountain Lake recommended to people that if you can schedule your day so that you are not in the area of the roundabout and Fountain Lake at 8 in the morning and 3 in the afternoon when school is letting in and out, he says that's a real pain at that time. And so if you can schedule your day to pass through there at other times, it's recommended.
As someone said the other day, with all the construction between here and Hot Springs, the best way to get to Hot Springs may be to go to Benton.
Can I ask a question? I'm asked all the time, what actually is going on Highway 7 going into Hot Springs? Is it gonna be just still one lane?
No.
Is it gonna be widened?
3 lanes. It's 3 lanes. It's 1 lane each direction with a center turn lane.
Okay, thanks.
It's, remember, you kind of think back to the old highway, John, you probably remember a little bit, the old Highway 70 used to be 2 lanes, then it turned into 3 lanes, then it turned into the superhighway.
Yeah,
So think of that.
okay.
With that, I'd like to turn it over to our distinguished honorable.
Well, I might add to that a little bit. That roundabout is a separate contract, but they're gonna have it fixed in time to tie it in. I drove over the entire bypass the other day. One thing is beautiful through there. It's probably, I think, one of the prettiest parts of the bypass. it's gonna make the time getting into, especially if you're going to 7 South and not the downtown historical area, if you're trying to bypass that, I believe your time is gonna be increased greatly. Don't understand why they didn't make it 4-lane instead of 2-lane that they're making it, but that contractor that has that one is ahead of schedule, scheduled to fall, as he said, hopefully it'll be before then. I'm unhappy with some of the construction on 7 North, some of y'all roads, you know, those huge drop-offs where you could go. There's been a lot of flooding that's caused by Chester Shaw. Some of y'all may know him. He unfortunately passed away. He was in his 90s. I was working with him some. He had hot spring excavating, so he has a lot of knowledge there. But still working on that. You know, in construction, sometimes you have good contractors and medium and bad. And we got a really good contractor on the bypass. We're working with the one on 7 North. So, but all that construction, although it's a pain to put up with, one day it'll be complete and it'll be much better. And so appreciate all the money and the work that's going in there. Another thing, what the legislation we're working on, we're going to be called back in session. The date, I don't remember, it's the end of September, beginning of October, that we're going to be called back in mainly to ratify the redrawing of the district lines. I have been told that the district line in Hot Springs Village will change. I currently have Hot Springs Village all the way up to close to Diamante, and everything Diamante that way is Laney Fight, which is a great guy. And so I don't know what's going to happen. I've been told there's a possibility I'm going to get more. I've been told that I'm going to get some of Jesseville, and it's going to change up. But that'll be, I think, I just got notice that the numbers, you know, this changes with the census, that the state has those numbers now, and the maps are going to be available very quick. So that's what we're going on. There's been a lot of questions about, are we going to be able to address any other legislation during that time? A lot of people have a lot of interest in the critical race theory, basically trying to stop that in the state of Arkansas. I believe it's very divisive and not a good thing at all. It teaches racism and division, and we don't need division. We need to pull together and stop the left and the right from fighting and work in the middle to solve some of the problems we have. But it seems like we have a struggle doing that right now. But I don't think that they're going to allow us to work on that. There's a lot of discussions, and, you know, I'm fairly new, so I'm still learning the rules. I'm not sure they don't change a little along the way, but at this point, I've been told that we're not going to be able to work on any extra legislation, whether it's the critical race or whether it's the injection mandates and all that. So I think things are going to stay in place as they are. Y'all may be probably already aware the mask mandate for the schools was a major thing. Well, somebody asked me when we were called back into session, what did we do? And I said the main thing we did is spent taxpayers' money, and that's about all we did. We actually did, the governor had done away with the $300 extra in unemployment to try to push people to go back to work. Because as y'all know, that's one of the biggest problems we're having. A judge came in and said, Governor, you can't do that. So the one thing we did do in that special session was pass a law so that the governor could do that. So that $300 is gone, and which hopefully people will go back to work. And so that's some of what's going on. It's a little slower times right now with summer vacations and things going on. But we're about to get back at it in the beginning of October and get those lines shored up and go from there. And that's about all I have at this time. Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is Saline County with Kurt and Keith. Y'all have anything to add today?
Yeah, you want the whole
You wanna
thing
go
right
ahead
now?
and do
You
your
want to do it?
JP
I'm doing my
comment?
JP thing.
Okay.
I got a whole bunch of stuff.
All right. Health Services, Sherry's not here today. The report for her is that she and her husband are on quarantine. Hot Springs, David, anything?
News from Hot Springs over the last couple of months. The city manager reported that as of the end of April, sales taxes revenue was up 35% over last year, which of course was COVID year. But the sales taxes were also still up 18% over what they had been in 2019 pre-COVID, so that's good. He also said that if you look at sales tax revenues in Hot Springs compared to 2011, that since 2011, they are now triple what they had been in 2011. So City of Hot Springs sales tax revenues have really exploded over the last 10-year period. He also stated that on July the 3rd, over 1,000 people, 1,000 visitors passed through the visitor center downtown, and on that one day, and that was a new all-time record for visitors going through the visitor center downtown. So visitations and sales tax revenues and those kinds of things are really up in the downtown area. He also made an interesting comment about COVID. He said that the hospitals in Hot Springs were all full of COVID cases. And he said that of all the people that are in the hospital with COVID, 98% of those have not been vaccinated. And he said there was one period of time where there was a total of 1,100 people in the hospital with COVID, and of those 1,100, only one of the 1,100 had been previously vaccinated. So the percentages of vaccination to non-vaccination of severe cases, hospitalized cases, is pretty significant. He said that there is now investment into the redevelopment of 3 downtown hotels. He did not name them, he just said 3 downtown hotels are under serious consideration for redevelopment. And the proposed Walton Entertainment Amphitheater at the old Majestic site, the board has voted to move forward with more serious negotiation and drill down for that project. Something I found really interesting in one of the meetings, it was publicly stated by the Hot Springs City Council that they have been watching the Hot Springs Village board meetings, and that they have been impressed and pleased with the peace, calm, quiet, and professionalism of the village board meetings over the last few months. And what I found, of course, most interesting about that is that they're watching, that downtown is paying attention to us out here. So that was an interesting insight. The city manager reminded everybody in one meeting that many of Hot Springs' main road arteries, Central, Grand, Malvern, several of the other main roads are not under the city of Hot Springs and not under its maintenance and upkeep. They are the responsibility of the state. So I think he was addressing the fact that he's gotten a lot of complaints about the condition of some of the main arteries in Hot Springs, and he felt the need to remind everybody that that falls under the state and not under the city. So he was another way to put it is he was throwing the state under the bus. And then finally, in one meeting, the board spent a lot of time talking about the development of the Walton Amphitheater. And then in a follow-up meeting, a couple of meetings later, they dedicated a lot of time to talking about making changes to the city's noise ordinance. And so Obviously, it occurred to them that, well, if we put a 6,000 or 8,000 seat amphitheater at one end of town, that could possibly have impact on our noise ordinance. So, and that's it.
Okay,
If
thank
I
you.
can add just a hair to that, I was in a meeting with the city manager and the county judge, and they are closely paying attention. There was a lot of talk about Hot Springs Village and what was going on. I like that. I think that, way back in the very beginning of Hot Springs Village, the relations between Hot Springs Village and Hot Springs weren't all that good. They've gotten much better over the years, and I think, Hot Springs Village is a big enough community. Your financial impact is, economical impact is huge, and I think having good relations and working together is a great thing. One thing I also forgot to mention in mine, it's a struggle for me to figure out, and I'm in the middle of trying to see, and I know Keith is involved in this too, of getting some of the CARES money, the rescue money, and how it can be used and how the federal government keeps us from doing that. But that's something that's frustrating to me because I can't seem to find out everything I need to know about how it's going to be used. But hopefully there's some areas in that may help the village coming forward.
Following up on David's comments about the ratio between vaccinated and unvaccinated people in hospitals, the police academy class last night had the Garland County coroner come speak. And he said he's not going to get into politics, but as close as he's going to get to politics is saying, get a vaccination. So it's, I think those numbers are somewhat chilling.
The thing that really surprised me was the latest coming out saying the village is only 47%
It
vaccinated.
did me too.
I mean, that just shocked me because I thought, that can't be right. But my
I thought
gosh,
we were a lot more than
Well, quite frankly, that's better than your surrounding communities of Fountain Lake, Crows, Perrin, Jessieville. That's quite a bit higher
yeah.
than those areas are. So, if you're going outside the village, or even inside the village, you need to be careful, cautious of what you do and who you deal with.
That's correct.
Also, just got new numbers that in Arkansas, our rate is 77.7 cases per 100,000. And Jonesboro is the hot spot with 118 per 100,000 in Arkansas. So at least our area is not the hot spot. And I believe vaccinations are growing. People are becoming a little more educated, but it's not moving fast enough.
Okay. Karen, anything on development or future speakers? You want to put in an ad for
I would like to
assistance?
put in an ad for ideas, yes. That is, thank you for saying that. Yeah, I'd love to know your ideas and, so please get with me. I'll stick around after the meeting. Let me know if you have some thoughts and ideas of who you'd like to have.
Karen,
coming up.
as it turns first of the year, it'd probably be appropriate to bring in Daryl out of Garland County and Jeff Airy out of Saline County.
Okay.
Because usually around the first of the year, bringing the judges in.
Okay.
Yeah, bring the
January,
judges in
February.
and they can talk too.
All right,
So
good
there,
job.
there's just planning ahead
Yep,
type of thing. And Larry, I guess you can work with Daryl, I'll work with Jeff to.
yeah.
That would be a good.
Your suggestions are always helpful. David suggested having this
Yeah.
meeting
very
today.
much so.
So
Yeah.
please get with Karen if you have any suggestions.
I'm the new kid on the block, y'all don't forget that, that I did agree to volunteer. I think I agreed to volunteer to do this, to get the speakers.
You weren't
up.
here, is I think what happened.
Yeah, something like that. I think that's exactly what happened, Bob. But, yeah, so y'all help me out.
Okay. Keith, you want to
Okay,
talk about
from Saline
Saline
County.
County?
Okay, first of all, Metro Plan type of stuff. Saline County, for this year's Metro Plan funding, will receive another $1.2 million for the Southwest Trail. That one goes on to account of the over $1 million received last year. So the Metro Plan is, which made a commitment to spending, I think it's $55 million over the next few years on trails and stuff like that, greenway type events. There's another commitment. The challenges for the village is, the key point on the Metro, or on Southwest Trail right now is the Pulaski-Saline County line, because you gotta get people down there. So that's where they're working. So by the time it gets anywhere impact on the village, it's gonna be a while. But I just wanna let you know, and then Larry for this is, trying to move it down to Garland County is another challenge, because remember, this trail goes from Little Rock all the way down to Hot Springs. But, the corollary to that is Metro Plan with this money also has the Greenways Trail project going on for the four-county region, and they have taken public comment and are in the middle of public comment for this trail system across Saline, Pulaski, Lonoke, and Faulkner County. And it's out there if you want to see the whole thing, how they're going to start laying out the whole trail system for this four-county. We are well behind Northwest Arkansas. We are really well behind Northwest Arkansas, but this is an attempt to try to catch up somewhat. But again, it takes a lot of work there. Also, Metro Plan was giving or provided census data for our CDP, and it's listed a little over, and Bob, I don't know if you've gotten this yet, but for the Hot Springs Village CDP, it's over 15,000 people. But there's some challenges with that, because when you look at the CDP, we pick up a little bit outside the village. But just, it's out there. Hopefully, the economic impact, the doctors start getting that information too. But the census data for the villages, and the tracks are actually out there. If you're so board someday to try to figure out which census tract is in the village and which ones are and which one aren't, it's all up there on their website now.
It's transparent, it's just not accessible.
Well, if you're one of those really data geeks, you could really go in and have a great time. I looked at it and just my head hurt, but that data's coming out, just like Richard said. They tried to do the redistricting, and we'll be through the whole redistricting for the JPs farther down the road, just like everybody else. American Rescue Plan funding, and I'll talk kind of both counties out here. The focus is still on the wastewater type of projects. I'm working with Jason Temple to try to get him focused on both sides, both outside the east gate and outside the west gate. There's some potential movement there that the county judges are willing to listen to potentials using some of that ARPA dollars that they're getting from the counties to help outside. And again, this goes into a frat recommendation. We can sell stuff outside the village and generate some revenue there. So this is, moving, like I said, both on the east side and the west side. Saline County will, the judge, the county attorney, and the comptroller will officially release to the quorum court next week their plan to how to compete for ARPA dollars. Because there's going to be a formal request for a proposal process that entities like Hot Springs Village can present a proposal, whether it be on wastewater or maybe broadband, that compete for these dollars. And the POA staff is aware of that and working on that. And but just like Representative McGrew said, if there's some way we can get some of these dollars, it may not be actually inside the village, but it will benefit the village and that we can make money off it. So I'll leave it at that. So that's kind of it for Saline County.
Okay. Larry, anything from Garland County?
There's a couple of things. David hit on something when he was talking about this noise ordinance thing. I think a lot of that is being driven also in the county by the fact that the short-term rentals are having a lot of impact. I'm sure you're having the same problem. I know the village is looking at it. And I will admit that there is a lot of people, or a lot of folks in both Garland County and in the city of Hot Springs watching what happens here, because we know what's already happened in the city, and the city has taken some action. County's really not taken any action at this time other than to start reviewing our existing ordinances and to see where we can strengthen those, because we have held 2 public meetings. And in both of those meetings, we got a wide variety of complaints. But they most often, the thing that you see recurring over and over and over again is the violation of private property lines, parking issues, noise issues. So there's a lot of people watching other people trying to figure out, how do we do this? And that's what we finally decided to do, because there's a definite kind of feeling with the 13 members on the quorum court that nobody wants to step on anybody else's rights. But the problem with it is I see it, this is just my personal view, is that when you come into an established neighborhood that has been single-family residences, now all at once you've got a commercial operation across the street, which is a hotel in essence. It may be a very small hotel, but it nonetheless is a commercial operation. That the guys that I want to side with, at least this is, if I have to come down on one side of the coin or the other, is the guys who have been there, who is a single-family resident. This is not what was intended when you had your zoning. And there is no zoning in the county, but there certainly is within the city. And that's a fine line to protect everyone's interest. But the biggest problem I think we have is you have to address it from the standard of public health, safety, and welfare. So that means you've got to do something about controlling your traffic, your parking, primarily if you have a disaster, so that the first responders can get in and out and do their services. Yeah, David?
Let me give you a name that could be helpful in terms of, you're talking about zoning and rezoning and city, at least city codes and that kind of thing in this regard. The city manager of El Paso, Texas, his name is Tommy Gonzalez. He has a national reputation as one of the leading city managers in the country. And one of his key areas where he's had a lot of success in multiple cities as he has moved through his career has been to create zoning and coding and the enforcement of those specific zones and codes that have proven to be both legally defensible and enforceable, and also effective. And he may be one of the leading experts in the country on being able to apply coding and zoning in an effective way. So somebody might want to ask him for his wisdom on that.
Certainly, I appreciate the lead, thank you. Matter of fact, his name is not unfamiliar to me. You're exactly right, he does have some national recognition. And
I worked with him in Dallas at one time.
oh, did you? Okay. But to go back to that issue, we don't have zoning in the county, as you probably don't in Saline County. I mean, counties just don't do that. It's
That's
more
why people live
laissez.
outside in the county.
That's right. But so we have to find, and that's an issue, to try to find how do you protect property rights within the county without the use of zoning. And of course, the biggest thing is that it would be homeowners associations or something like that. And so we try to, and what the problem with those are is that many of those, although they exist, they don't exist everywhere, and when they do exist, they're usually not paid attention to, which means they don't have a continuity of enforcement or a continuity of review to keep them up to date with what's going on. And so the first thing we have to tell citizens when they come to us and they're in the county is that you need to take a look at what your resources are beyond zoning, because zoning just doesn't exist.
And whoever approaches him, if they want to just say that David Childs referred them,
Well, certainly.
that might be helpful.
I appreciate it.
Larry, where does Billboro stand on their attempt on the short-term rentals to generate taxes and to put that into place?
Good question, because I asked him that very point. If these guys are gonna be allowed to operate as a commercial entity, then over and above what you have already done, because they are having a per bed charge, so on and so forth. Are you gonna look at taxes beyond that? Because when you really think about it, they have an arm up on a regular hotel or motel, you know, and that's not fair. It doesn't keep it balanced. They have not decided yet. And I think that's an issue that kind of came up.
Well, it came
But
up
they
with the
didn't,
frat.
but they never bothered paying any real attention to it. But
Yeah,
now they're
well,
starting to get pressure.
They
Richard?
did, you know, the city charges 50 cents per bed annually there, and I've heard, and I don't know if it's come from fruition, there was a lot of talk about a lawsuit because the city's charging motels $4 a bed.
Right.
And so if they're gonna be considered the same, they should be treated the same, was one thing. Also, they're requiring, and this was one place they're giving revenue, is all of those vacation rentals to get a business license for the city of Hot Springs. So they're getting revenue through that and through the beds now.
We've had those very same talks on a county level, but the problem with it is we have a lot of resistance on the quorum court about invoking those kinds of controls. However, I think it's when you are a county like Garland County, where there's not a lot of agriculture work, and it's making some transitions into more of a urban area, if you will, that ultimately their hand is going to be forced to take some action to protect the property owners by taking some active measures. And this short-term rental thing is just bringing all of that up to the forefront earlier than I think anybody really wanted to address it. So it's going to be a slow go for us, I think.
Well, and do we look at it the same way we have for HSV? You know, we have HSV-specific ordinances for
Right.
both counties. This is something for Joni and John. You know, if it's something you want the counties to start thinking about, you need to let us know so that little Larry and myself can start laying the groundwork that something like this may be tried to work through a quorum court. But I think the key right here is knowing what the city has in place, because that would be our first starting, what Hot Springs has in place to kind of work.
We
forward.
actually held a meeting, and we had Gary Carnahan and the assistant city manager come and talk to us about why they passed the rules and regulations they had and what drove those. They did get some input, and I kind of gathered from the comments that some of their input came from Santa Fe, New Mexico, and that they had probably a heavier reliance on what they saw there than they did in some other areas. I don't know what they necessarily, they never really identified, nor have I gone back and asked them exactly what were the things that you got out of Santa Fe that you liked, that kind of thing, because that might be of interest to us in the county. But that was one of the first things we did through Public Health Safety and Welfare Committee, was try to determine why did the city take it the action it did, which a lot of people were very critical of, especially criticism came from two areas. People who run SRTs who thought it was, well, you're getting too much into my business. They really liked the idea that nobody was paying attention to them. And then the other side of it was the hotels and motels looking at it saying that, wait a minute, they have an unfair advantage. And so you see that scale. Moving away from that subject, the other thing that's really bothering us right now, and I think you're probably having the same problem as at Saline County, is that we are running with people being vaccinated at the county level, meaning county employees, at about that 50%, 47 to 50% mark. It's difficult to get people to take some people to take the vaccine. The county judge and I have talked about incentives, but it was my personal opinion that I didn't want to get involved in incentives, because then you end up paying employees to take a vaccine. If you're not driven by the concern of health of yourself, your family, and your neighbors, what does $100 or $200 mean? But some people react to cash where other people don't. Darrell's never really come down with anything at this point. My deal was, I just didn't want to go and set up a precedent to where any future request would end up with people with their hand out. How are you going to pay me to do it? That kind of thing. We've had one death in the county, a county employee who was diagnosed, went into the hospital, and ended up on a ventilator, and she passed away. You would think that would drive other members of the employment group to get vaccinated, but I understand the mixed messages. Part of what I've heard here today is interesting in this context. There is great distrust across the country and here locally of government in general. And I think it primarily is because of the past election. I don't want to really get into the politics of that, but then the things that have happened since then, and people are, and if you watch the news as I do, you know, and I hear this from people all the time, they parrot what they hear. It's distrust, it's I've been lied to. They just don't trust anybody on any issue, on any level right now. It's a sad, sad state of affairs, but that's where we are. And I can understand why they are confused about whether they should or should not get the vaccine. And I gotta tell you, personally, for my wife and I, and we're both, my wife is in her late 70s, I turned 80 this year, and I gotta tell you, it was a hard decision even with that, because we're in that demographics, you know. But I said, you know, I like being alive. I don't know whether this is gonna do it or not, but I'm getting the vaccine, you know, that kind of thing. So we did it, and I wish you could get other people to make that same decision. But I also defend the right of any individual to say, no, I don't want to do it, you know. That, in a nutshell, is where Garland County is. Things are really at a snail's pace right now, and a lot of it is because there are so many other problems cropping up with just trying to keep up with business on a day-to-day basis that we're not really paying attention or having the time to address these other issues, except that we know we've taken a very deliberate, move slowly but move accurately kind of approach.
Thank you, thank you. Any other questions? The old business item is the economic impact study. I'll give you an update on that. I've been in contact with Dr. Miller at University of Arkansas in Little Rock. He's working on the subject. He has been in contact with Melissa and Mike Murphy for get information from the schools. Stephanie got me the information from the POA yesterday. The final part, she's had part of it for a while now. And the next item we're looking at is trying to track visitors. And any thoughts anybody has, Stephanie's looking at it. Karen's trying to look at it from the realtor standpoint. If anybody has any ideas about who might be tracking, who might have some data that we can feed to Dr. Miller, that would be good. As far as a timeline for getting the report out, I don't have one yet. We were working on a September sort of soft deadline. That got pushed back some because of the census data delays. But I know it's in process now in Little Rock, and I should be able to give you a much better idea next month. Any questions about that? Any new business that we need to raise? Okay, our next meeting will be October the 1st, 2021. Same time, same bat channel. So everybody have a good month and stay safe and stay healthy. Thank you.